This video is one in a series of videos that cover database topics in 3 themes. We look at Oracle APEX, Application Express for web applications, relational database concepts for designing and building databases, and SQL, the programming language for working with a relational database. If you want to work with the video series, you can go to this URL to get the scripts and handouts. In this video, we're going to see how we can make improvements on a form that APEX has created for us. We will keep the original form and make a copy so that we can compare the two, what APEX gave us automatically and what we can do to improve that form. We will also look at the existing data that we have in the table, which will help us decide what we'll do next, which is provide lists of values. Aids to data entry with drop-down lists that users can select from instead of keying in data. We'll have 2 different types of lists. One is called static and the other is dynamic, and these are found or built in the shared components section of Application Builder. So static means it doesn't change. You provide a list, you don't expect it to change over time. Dynamic means you're going to pull data from a source, and that source can be modified over time. I'll mention here, because it's one of my pet peeves, when I look at some demonstration videos and examples in a few books about database, you do not use the column that you are populating with data, that you're entering data into, to provide the list of allowable values. And I have seen this as an example many times. This would be like me when I was teaching, giving a test and asking my students to then provide me with the answer key. Some of them would get it right, some of them would give me erroneous answers. You have to provide a valid, separate source for the list of values that you're going to let users select from. Human error. Someone pointed out in my previous video that I did something that was just basically incorrect. It didn't really have any impact on what I was trying to illustrate, but what I did was import a picture of a little Chihuahua Terrier mix, even though the record I was modifying was for a pit bull. Human error. It's always there, and sometimes the software development tool really can't prevent that. So let's log into Animal Shelter in a developer account. So I'm logged in as Mina Mendez. I'm going to go to the application builder, go to my application, and I'm going to select animal info. Then I'm going to come to the plus drop down and I want to copy this page. I'm going to copy this page in this application and I'm going to let it number it, but I will say animal info LOVs, LOV lowercase s. I'll have it APEX create a menu item in home, and I could specify things that I might want to modify on the copy, but I'll leave it as is and click copy. So notice I'm in page 4. And if I run that right now, it looks exactly like page 3. Before I modify this form, I have to look at the data and make decisions about whether or not to create a static LOV or to create a dynamic LOV. I'm going to use SQL Developer because it is a little more interactive and flexible than if I use Object Browser in SQL Workshop here in APEX. So I'm going to bring up SQL Developer and I'm logged in as Animal Shelter. And I need to look at the animals table. I can also see that in a Word file where I have taken a picture of the data dictionary where I isolated the animals table. The decisions have to be made for category, dominant breed, primary color, mix, adult size, sex, status, house trained, spayed, neutered. To make a decision on what type of LOV, we'll look at the data itself. I can click on the Data tab and see the data, but we have many records. So what I would like to do is use some SQL to isolate data that's distinct. I don't want to see repeated values. So for example, if we're looking at category right now, I could do SQL select distinct category from animals. Execute that, and there's only one, dog. Now if I come back to the table itself and look at columns, we see a comment out here, animal categories such as dog, cat, or bird. So we think there'll be other types of animals coming into the shelter in the future, so we need to allow for that. So the fact that I just see dog right now doesn't tell me exactly what I need. I need a more complete knowledge of the background of the organization and the purpose of the database. Now if I look at primary color, we see many options there. I'm going to come up here and just change category to primary_color, and we have 20 options. And we noted in a previous video that we're seeing some things where tan, black, white sometimes start with a capital letter, sometimes don't, and those get treated differently. We're going to address this issue in the next video. We will clean up some data and then control the way the data goes in to the database. But I'm not actually going to create a list of values for primary color in this particular video. If we choose to do so, we can do it at a later date. This one we're not going to do. So I'll go ahead and mark that one out. Now for mix, let's take a look at that. Right now we only see yes, it's mixed, or basically it's not. So we don't have a comment in that particular column right now. Adult size, so we have large, medium, miniature, extra large, small. I made a note of those on a piece of paper, and I might use that list if I decide to create a static list. After adult size, let's look at sex. Change that to sex and run that. And we have male, female. Oftentimes when you have two choices, or two choices that come to mind, you might also need a third, which is unknown, not available. So sometimes people force the person entering data to make a decision, yes, no, when in fact they actually don't know the answer to the question. So you might want to consider, when you have two options, adding a third for not available or unknown. I'm going to look at status next. Status is quarantined, fostered, transferred, available, adopted. Those are the options right now. For the rest of these, I can tell you, house trained, it's going to be a yes, no, or unknown. Spayed, neutered, yes, no, or unknown. At the point in which the animal's brought in, we might not have the answer of whether or not this has been done. So basically what I'm going to do is, on category, I'm going to make this a static LOV. For dominant breed, we have already made this a lookup, because we had Apex create a table so that we can look up the dominant breed. On mix, it's going to be a yes, no field, yes, no, unknown, perhaps. Adult size, I'm going to make that a static field. Sex is going to be male, female, unknown. Status, that is going to be another lookup, so we'll have that created. And house trained will be yes, 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 no, unknown. Spayed, neutered, yes, no, unknown. This is the design we're going to go with. Back in Apex, let's look at how we create static versus a dynamic lookup. I'm going to go to Application and then click on Shared Component. And in one of these sections we see List of Values. I'm going to select List of Values, and I'm going to create. Notice, by the way, actually we have a list of values here which is for the dominant breed that was created for us also when we did the lookup feature in the object browser in Apex. I'm going to create a couple of static ones. Do a create. This will be from scratch, and this is going to be yes, no, and it's going to be static. When you do static, you will key in the values. So I'm going to key in yes and yes. Actually, I'm going to change that to just a capital Y, and this will be no, and that'll be a capital N. And I'll scroll down and do unknown and do a U. Then I'll click Create List of Values. Now I went with the one letter option because if I come back here and look at my database, I'm going to use that yes, no for mix, which allows 3 characters. I'm going to use it for house trained, which allows up to 10, spayed neutered, which only allows 1. So that's why I decided you have to go with the smallest field available. We could have also edited this field, but I'm going to go with YNU because we'll use this one LOV for all 3 fields. I'll create one more while I'm here. It'll be from scratch, and it will be static, and this will be sex, and so this will be female F, male, female. Let me fix that, and that'll be M. And again, I'm going to go with unknown U and create that list. The one other static list I'm going to create is for category. There's a good argument for making this a dynamic lookup, but I'm going to go with static because I think we can predetermine what categories of animals we can take in the foreseeable future. So this is going to be category, or maybe I'll say animal category, and that will be static. And I'll type in the values, pause the video, and then I'll show you what the values are. So I'm repeating the word in the display as well as in the return. What I didn't explain in the previous yes, no option or male, female is this is what we'll see in the list. That's the display. This is what will be stored in the field in the table. So I'll create this list. So think of the fact that a list of values will have a display column that you pick from, but that is not necessarily the value that gets stored in the field. So how do we use this? Let's go back to our application, and let's go to the form, page 4 in my case, and we're going to come over here to category, and we're going to change this from text field to select list. When we do, we get a warning that we have something that needs to be fixed. We need to now scroll down and look for the list of values. The basis for this is going to be a shared component. So let me just say briefly, and this will come up again, I'm sure, I could have written code here in SQL, but then it would be tied to that one field or that one page item in this form. By putting it in shared components, I make it available to other page items in this page and in other pages. So I'll do shared component, and then I have to select, and that would be for category, animal category. Having done that, I'll save it. I will go ahead and jump down to mix. Again, that's going to be a select list. Scroll down to my list of values. That'll be shared component, and I want yes, no. I'm going to repeat this for house trained and spayed neutered, the yes, no options. I'll pause the video while I do that. I also have a select list or LOV for sex, so I'll do my select list. So I scroll down, set it for shared component, and then I pick sex. Let's save this and let's run this. We see to the far right of the input box that we now have a drop down. I can click that and I can see what my choices are. Now I'm not looking at actual data right now. I'm not looking at an actual record. That's why I don't see anything already selected. So you've probably noticed that even though we had a category of dog, we now have canine. In the next video, we're going to do some data cleanup. So we'll convert any field that has dog into canine. But we won't bother with that right now. But I could select this, and then for mix, I could come down and say, is it mix? Yes or no. And I could say for the sex, male, female, and so on and so forth. So we can see how this would work. I'm not going to try to save these changes, however, because this is not for an existing animal or a new animal coming into the shelter. It's just to illustrate what is happening. I'm going to pause the video and create one more static list, and that's going to be for adult size. I did want to show you that I'm going to display the full word or words and then do the abbreviation that we saw in the column comments in the table. So I'm going to create that list. Back in the form, I edited this particular page item, so now we see the options for size, for adult size. The last thing in this video is to create another dynamic list of values. So I'm going to go to SQL Workshop Object Browser, and I'm going to have Apex create another list of values for me from the animals table based on the data in status. So I'll create a lookup table, and this will be on status. I'll take the defaults and create that lookup. So now we have a status table, and these are the status records. Over in animals, we now, going out to the far right, have a status ID. That means that we've got to make a modification in the report that pulls from this table, and we need to create a list of values that we can use in the form. So I'm going to go back to the application, and I'm going to go to our application and go to shared components. Go to list of values. What I don't have here is a list of values based on the status ID. So I'm going to create that, and to do that I will have to write some SQL code. So from scratch, this will be status list, and it will be dynamic, which means the lookup will be based on the current records displayed in the status table. So I'm going to change this code. I know that this first column in the select clause will be what I want the list to show. The second column is what I want stored in the column in the record. So that's going to be status underscore ID, and I know that because that's the way the lookup wizard works. And this is going to come from animals. So just let me repeat. Select status. That's what will show up in the drop-down list as D. D is simply a column alias. Comma, status underscore ID as R, the return value, which is what gets stored in the field in that record from the animals table, and order by sorts by the first column. That's what the 1 means. I will create that list of values. Oh, wait a minute. That's wrong. It's not animals. What am I thinking? I want status underscore lookup. That's the name of the table that provides the list. Now create this. Go back to my application. Go back to my form. Go to status. Before I scroll down, I need to switch this to select list. So I scroll down to my list of values, shared component, status list. Save this, run this, and then when I come down here to status, I see my list. So the page 4 report is working now. It seems to be functional. But if I go to the report that pulls data from the animals table, it's broken because of status. So I'll go to Edit Page 2. Because it's a report, it's not interactive with the data in the tables. I will come over here in Properties and go to the source code, the SQL query, pop that open, and I will change the status to _ID, status _ID, click OK, and then I can save that and run that, and we now have a functioning report. However, the functioning report calls the original form. So take a second. I know this has been a long video. In report, I'm going to go to the report attributes over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to have the page called when we want to edit something. I want to switch that from 3, which is the bare bones form we got at the beginning, to 4, which has all my lists of values, the drop-down lists. It's also very important to set the items. What I want to do is switch from P3, animal _ID, the page item in page 3, I want to switch that to P4. And what's happening here is the animal ID for the next to the pencil that I click, that value is going to be used to find a match over in the form P4 _animal ID primary key field. So I click OK. Then I also need to come down to Create. If you click the Create button in the report, then we scroll down and we again select the target page not as 3 but as 4, and click OK and save that and run that. So if I click here, I get an error. So I'll edit this page, and under status I need to come down and modify this where I have the source. It's no longer status, it's status _ID. I'm sorry this has been a really long video and I've kind of bounced around making some changes. But let's do a save, run this. I see my report. I can edit and go to that form and I see my data. And when I click apply changes, or I don't want to delete, I can come back to my report, pick another record, that's 1002, and I see my data. Sorry for the long video. I'm glad we got through this though.